Hey, today, following up from yesterday and this weekend's message, I want us to think about a couple things. One is this continuing idea about our identity and why it's such an important, critical thing, how we are hardwired to find an identity, create an identity. It's our way of being, and we are compulsed, consciously or unconsciously, to try to find a set of messages that make sense to us in order, here's the purpose for identity, in order to find stability in life. And so if we're not on this journey where we're trying to establish a sense of stability, we're going to feel unstable, and it's going to create an identity crisis. That's what a crisis is. It's whenever whatever I've been relying on for stability is threatened. And so in the book, Identity, I talk about four points of identity control. It's just exactly how it sounds. It's four ways we try to control our identity, control our sense of being, our sense of stability. And in those, we need to unearth, we need to look at those, unbury them, get them to help them rise to the surface so we can see them clearly, so we can recognize that even when they seem to be working, they're not going to work forever because they're built on the flesh. They're built on this world. And so I need an identity that's built on something stronger than just the stuff that I can control. I need it to be built on something beyond my control. The only identity that we have available for us is a spiritual identity that's beyond us. And so as we move in that direction, I want to just point out the four areas where we try to control. And so I'm going to give you kind of an overview of the 4 points of identity control. And then week by week, we'll kind of unpack a little bit more of each one of these. So the first one is your born identity. Your born identity is what you got when you came into the world, your day of birth. It's your genetics. It's your ethnicity. It's possibly your family's occupation, or like for me, I was raised on a farm, and so my born identity was a farm kid. That was a part of my born identity. Your genetics, it's the way you look. How many of us are not, don't go through some level of instability when we're just getting used to how we look? I mean, maybe you're one of those ones that's just, you've been handsome from the beginning, and that's never been a problem. But for most of us, we're too skinny, or we're too fat, we have too large of a nose, or too small a lips, or some aspect, some perfect body shape image out there has caused us to be eluded from contentment in our own bodies. That's a born identity. It's when your family has some clout in your family name. In our community, I could start naming off some names in the Merced community, and you'd go, oh yeah, and there'd be a sense of they got money, they got prestige, they got power. And if you're born into that kind of family, there's kind of an identity boost, right? There's a sense that you're somebody because of the family you were born into. Conversely, what if you're born into a family that doesn't have any clout, no prestige, no power, no affluence? Then your born identity is not so good. So our born identity is this first set of messages that we told ourselves about ourselves from the earliest time we can remember. And yours might be good, it might be bad. It might be something that gives esteem or something that lacks esteem. Born identity. Real quickly, just so you have them on your radar, the next one is your artificial identity, which are usually everything that we do that usually kind of fits into culture. That culture says, oh, you're really somebody if you have power. And so it's positions of power. That's an artificial identity. You're really somebody if you've got a lot of wealth. Okay, so someone that's got acquired or has great possessions. We think we're more valuable because of our valuables. You've heard me say that. Those are all artificial things. They're even in terms of, a person's degrees that they achieve. They achieve those, and when they're building their identity on those, it's still artificial. It can be taken away in a heartbeat. Lose your job, lose your health. No one cares about what degree you have. Those are artificial ways of seeing ourselves. That's the second one. The third one is your broken identity. The broken identity could rise out of the born identity. If your family's crazy dysfunctional, if there's abuse, then the broken identity can rise out of the born identity. But the brokenness, we all have some. We all have a measure of each of these, and so be thinking about that. The fourth one is your fantasy identity. It's just a break from reality. It is just not true. And whereas the artificial, it has some roots in reality because you really do possess those things. But a fantasy identity just breaks from reality. It's an escape from reality. And so maybe someone out of a broken identity pursues a fantasy identity. So we'll dig into each one of those a little bit more, but I wanted to give you kind of a day, just kind of rough those out for you. And so where would you say biblically we could land on some of those? Well, there's points we can land on each one of those areas, but they summed up in Proverbs 14:12 and 16:25. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death. Judges chapter 21, verse 25 says, everyone did what was right in their own eyes, right? It's everyone trying to figure out on their own who they are. Leaving God out of the equation adds up to a false identity. Can you begin to put together what some of yours are? We said yesterday, we'll repeat it today, to name what is false is the first step to be freed by what is true. Lord Jesus, help us to see and recognize where our born identity has gripped us, or an artificial identity, or a broken identity, or a fantasy identity. God, open our eyes in the weeks to come that we might be able to name what is false so we can truly be freed by you, the way, the truth, and the life. I'll see you tomorrow.